here is a proposal. Once I imagined like the possibility of seeing a map of maps. A map that could contain, potentially, all maps ever. Like a huge encyclopedia of maps. How to do such a thing? How to ensemble and what logic is in within maps that enable these things to work. So the first thing that I thought about is that a map basically is attention. A map is a process. A map is something that links two things. And these two things that are linked basically is the horizon and the cartographic plateau. What do I mean by this? The horizon is what we see, what is there, what we have here. And the cartographic plateau is the way we represent that horizon. Therefore, we are having two different planes at the same time. We have, by one side, the map itself, the drawing, the thing that we unfold in order to not to get lost in the street, and at the other, the street itself. So strangely, the map is not the paper, and it's not the street. The map is me walking through the street with that paper. The map is something that creates like a special, like a double. It is something like walking through my own doppelganger. So, what is a doppelganger? The interesting part with maps is that they are tools. They are machines. They make these doppelgangers in order to jump. They are like trampolines that leads you from one dimension into another. Therefore, maps are tools for moving dimensionally. And we can see this if we can explain and we can understand what is dimensionality. We have 0 dimension. We are talking about a dot, 0 up, 0 down, nothing moves, but everything is contained. So we have no dimensions, and we have basically everything and nothing at the same time. How does the reality opens the next step for the next dimension? Basically, the dots needs to confront itself with another dot. So 2 dots, the possibility of jumping through these 2 things is the possibility of creating a tool, creating a machine. And we have the same thing that happens from the first dimension, let's say the line, and the second dimension, the territory. If we confront 2 lines, we have like this, we show the doppelganger of the native unit in a scale to itself. It opens itself reality to the next scale. And we start seeing this mechanic going through all dimensionalities. So we have 2 lines, we have a territory, we have 2 territories, we have volume. We have 2 volumes, then we have the 4th dimension. So basically what I'm proposing is that maps are the interdimensionality in between the realities themselves. So we can start dividing maps depending on which are the things they are connecting. If we have maps that are from 0 to 1, then we are having like this space in between the 0 dimension and the first dimension. We have maps that use like the 1 to 2, and so on, and so on, and so on. So basically what we have is like something that this link, this surface against reality is the thing that we call the map, this walking by, this passage through. And strangely, if we start like thinking, what is the thing they are referring to? There are specific questions. There are native questions in each of these interdimensionalities. The first question, of course, if you have like a dot, if you have like the unit, the 0 unit, and it's confronted by itself, what you have is like the first question, the basic question of everything. Who? Because it's the own conscious of the dot asking itself. The basic question between zero dimensionality and first dimensionality is who. If we move on, then we have the question how. If we move on, where. If we move on, when, and so on and so forth. Therefore, like reality starts spreading itself into different zones. So, basically, maps, we have to think them as dimensionality machines, dimensional machines, projections that allow us to throw ourselves into different dimensions. And if you can see, we have in here like the example of the dot. We have a dot, and a dot that requires its own doppelganger to open into another dimension. Two parallel directions leave us or throw us into space, into the territory. The territory which confronts itself creates height and creates the possibility of a volume. And a volume expanding itself into all the spatial possibilities in a specific moment creates an object where space and time is fused within each other. Therefore, space and time is the same thing. And if you see it in geometrical terms, it works the same way. We have like the dot, and if you expand this dot in its opposite, then you have the tension that creates a line. And if this line is confronted, then you have the space, and so on and so on. You can see it. Well, it's a little bit more complicated when you start like jumping from dimensions that are not our native dimensions. In the third dimension, things start getting more complicated, because imagine that you have a cube and you have to throw its own projection into the fourth dimension. Basically, it's throwing this object, throwing a cube into itself, but connecting itself with all its vortex. So what we have is something that mathematicians call a tesseract, a hypercube. And the hypercube, imagine that you have, just to explain it in plain words, imagine that you have two cubes that hold each other at the same time, in which all the sides, all the measurements are the same. So a very, let's say, efficient way of showing, as you can see, is like that one. It's a cube within a cube, connected within all its corners to the same cube, but the thing that we have in here, it has like this penalty of representing the drawing into a second dimension, trying to represent a third dimension, which shows us different sizes. In the fourth dimension, it will not happen. In the fourth dimension, everything will happen at the same time. So, this is an hypercube. Everything is like flowing. So, how to apply this thing into maps, basically? The first thing that I decided is, okay, we're talking about how to connect and how to create these tensions in between passageways, this going into one dimension into another. And then I discovered that there are a lot of things that could not be considered a map, that in this type of approach, you can. Because the main interest of the depiction of something is to make a bridge in between things. For example, in here we have like a diagram showing the brain and its nerves, or the spine. So we're talking about the main topic about such a drawing is talking about circulation. You have, I don't know, the Ars Notoria of Apollonio de Tyana. You have the map of Plato's Atlantis. You have different ways, and by example, if we take this map as an example, the thing that we have is, it is not useful for Plato to describe a specific territory about Atlantis. The important thing for this drawing is to throw ourselves from space into time, or from a space into something that we have no idea what it is. But that's the main goal of this map. Therefore, we can start organizing maps in different ways. So, this is a basic collection of maps that I've made myself, and what they represent, different moments. You have like medical things. You have, well, this is the part of the circulation. You have dots, you have stars, You have Chinese people trying to describe the world. You have circuits. You have things like this. For example, this Kodiak dancing coat, it's basically a map, which it's like the magician uses this thing in order to describe the connections in between the stars, the constellations in the sky, but he dances with it. The important thing with this map, it is not that it is not to see, it is to dance with. Therefore, this map is another thing. This map is not to see, this map is to organize itself temporarily, to throw itself into a whole history and a process of ideas, of a story. You have, by example, another one, which is the Palangaku ceremonial at Jaramunga, which is little plates drawn by hand, which in fact they describe the migration of people, but they are done in plates. And that's really important. They are thinking in something else, rather than just representing this thing as a visual thing. They are representing this thing as a matter of eating itself, as a matter of using this matter into daily life. You have even, for example, in here, the radial foreign patterns and memory networks in the some bubble crabs. It seems that it should not be a map, because basically it's not human-made. But in this type of classification, this is really important, because it represents something. And this representation is a function within the crab. You have also Kabbalistic attempts. You have magical representations of impossible things. You have wrong maps. You have typographical maps. You have codes. You have theories. You have comparisons. You have geographical maps. You have distorted maps. You have comparative maps of stars that could not be seen clearly. You have dots in the middle of the territory. You have stones piled one on each other. And this is important, by example, this is a really nice example of what's a dot. This is, for me, one of the first maps that could enter in this category, because it's like the first attempt of saying this is here. This is the starting point of something. Therefore, these strange stones are representing the whole universe. So I made myself, or for example, this one, which is really nice, the fridge. Oleg Matyasov suffered from a psychiatric condition that led him to cover all surfaces in his apartment with inscriptions, authored in several years. Or you have how to read the lips in criminal law. Fingertips, and so on, and so on, and so on. I made myself a collection around of 5,000 of these type of images, of these kinds of maps, and what to do with them, how to organize them, how to make something out of this. Or this one, which is absolutely one of my favorite ones, which is it's charts made by my Polynesian people. That basically what you see, it's a map that looks like little sticks wrapped upon each other, trying to represent something. But these maps, strangely, again, they are not for seeing. These maps are for feeling. The way to read these maps is to lie on your canoe, take them, and just by feeling the waves and how they behave in your canoe while you are seeing the sky, you can start recognizing the currents that you are feeling with your hands. Therefore, things start getting strange. Coffee readings. Just the Marshall Islands, this type of maps. The subconscious maps. And so on, and so on, and so on. Kabbalistical maps. Alchemical maps. Maps of hell. Maps of the first light on Earth. Maps of the whole of Earth. Maps of Mars, maps, imagine maps, and so on. So what do? I gather all these maps and then start realizing that because of these reasons that I've been saying, you can really order them because of the reasons they were made. This is trying to answer the question, who? This is trying to answer the question, what? This one is trying to say, when? This one is trying, like there's a main topic. By example, we have an example in here. This is the classical medieval map that it's like reincarnated several times, which is trying basically to say us where. Like the main question is where? Where am I? And you can see the incarnations and almost like the same map trying to push itself off its own boundaries. The famous T map. When ideology start winning over like the map and then start imposing itself. The forms start winning over the description, the geographical description. As you can see, in this type of organization, the importance is in the multiplicity of the possibilities of the form, in the arrangement and the gathering of all these things. This was a really, really famous map because it used to describe that Jerusalem was in the center of the world. And slowly start like evolving into different things. And so on. So well, what to do with all these maps? How to organize them? We have all these plates already displayed. Now this is my working tables, like my working charts, where I use them just to organize how they are. By example, these are like the maps that describe time. Just they are trying to describe certain moments, like repetition through time. By example, the Chinese, which they are absolutely wonderful maps because they do not talk about time, they do not represent time, but the only thing that they do is time creating because they are so long that it's impossible to see it at once. Therefore, you have to walk through them in order to see them. So they are maps which are creating time. Maps that are pushing you to go into time questions. Or mandalas, which are, they are not really to describe a specific space. They are more to like psychological landscapes. Time in within generations. Time in within currents of music. Timing within human perception of life. Timing within like how to construct religions, how to go through passageways. Timeless clocks, times a description of places. And so on. But well, the important part of this thing is that basically there are a lot of things that start like gathering in here. A lot of things that they try to push in the same direction. We make like the whole turn of my plates. The interesting part is like how to order. So what I did is like I imagined that I was making like almost like a cube, almost like an hypercube. So what I did is like I arranged them in scales and I created like small maps, logical maps that could flow in within each other, but at the same time they would start describing meticulously from 0 dimension into the n to 5 dimension. That is to say, like to make the whole turn around dimensionalities structures. So I order them, after ordering them in questions, order them in subjects in within this thing. And then start finding certain subjects. For example, Here we have like this line that is like flowing through like a bunch of I created basically a furniture, and this furniture have like drawers. Each of the drawer represent a level of this dimensionality. So therefore, if you want to read something specifically, you are like falling through all these drawers and starting getting more dense in terms of dimensionality. So in the end, my attempt was to show something that was almost like, I could not present you the thing that I have in my head, because I cannot present you time and space at the same time. But basically it's like everything is like holding itself and trying to make something that is within itself. It's an hypercube that can only be shown in pieces, but they are all working together. This is the furniture that was created. So we have like all these drawers, and depending how you play with these drawers, how you show them, things appear. Then we're talking about apparitions of things in the world. By example, in this case, you have like the platforms that goes from, by example, units, the thing that I was saying, like you are in the first 0 level, so all maps representing dots, like very, very focal places, or situations, but really punctual situations. And you start flowing from there into masses of units, and then to collections, and then to sequence, and then to comparison of units, and then to mapping units, and then to lines, and then to sequentiation of these lines, then to constellations, then to forces, then to body, then to the orbit, then to chains, circuits, fluxes, layers, instructions, descending to hell, areas, planes, nets, territories, orbis terrarum. So like basically it's a description of how the world starts getting weight in itself, how it gains body, how it gains a time, how it gains a space. The story within these things and these apparitions is the story of how reality is created. And you have such a fortunate maps like this one, like the hand, someone who has been asked to describe a territory, and the only thing that he could think of is to explain mountains within his hand. And so on. So, the interesting part with this is that now it's a machine. How do we know that it's a machine? Because if you start using it, it will not only show you the subjects in which you arrange them, but subjects that you've never seen before. In here, well, let me see. You can start seeing that things start getting connected. And these connections is the real subjects that we're talking about. This is like each of the trajectories by its own. But then we can put them together. And then a complete concept appears. If we make all these concepts appear, basically the thing that we're doing is making like these turns around on hypercubes. And then we have concepts appearing. This is the concept, by example, of machines. Something that I never thought about before seeing the combinations in within. This is the forms of the earth. And the numbers that you are seeing here is using these drawers, these things will appear. The drawer number 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 9 will give you systems. The 5, 6, 8, the whole of Earth. Axis mundi, utopia, battles, polis, the rhizome, trees, transit, sympathetic connections, and so on. And as you can see, like it's almost like endless the way you can organize these things. But you start seeing connections where you've never seen before, and it's telling its own story. And then I start like creating like charts to show them all at the same time. One of the things that somehow gets us hooked with these stories is this one. This is a very nice example about what is this thing. This is the story of how the turtle shell Well, this is a very, very strange and long story about how in China the magicians start using the tortoise shells of this ancient and mythological animal, because remember that this time people were like, I don't know, 30 years old and you were really, really old. Therefore, the turtle, which lasted 100 years, could last 3 generations of people. Therefore, it was a very, very wise animal that could hold the secret of future, past, and present. And they realized that every time that you throw the turtle shell into fire, it cracked all the time in 6 parts. These 6 parts are the way of reading chance, the way of reading the universe. These crackings basically is a relation of something that the world is speaking. These crackings is the origin. Well, this is like the stones that the turtle shells that are used. This is the way they were depicted, and they are the origin of the I Ching. The I Ching started from the breaking of the turtle. So a very, very interesting start happening, like certain patterns that you see in nature as a way of getting connected to it, then start creating language. And nowadays, they've been discovered around like 20,000 turtle shells, and they are considered the origin of libraries. This is one thing that is called the semantics, and the semantics is something that in the beginning of the century was discovered that frequencies with little particles, when they react against a specific frequency, they create a specific pattern. And these patterns, strangely, they are connected with the mandalas, and they are connected as well with the form of the shells of the turtle. So therefore, there's a strange connection of frequencies, of vibration of particles, of form, and of developing of something. This is the semantics, so you can see like there's like this strange resemblance. And I've been interested in all these things because basically it's like, how do you connect something and how you establish like an empathic relation? How do you make like something from this place moves and change into this one, and at the same time you are the one who is moving? This is, well, the story of this is another story. I don't know if you have like interest enough, because well, just like the last idea, I've been working with this concept, which is absolutely related to this, which is the concept of perichoresis. The perichoresis is a Greek idea. They thought that the whole universe was created in a single point. The origin of everything was just one dot. And this dot was called the perichoresis. And the perichoresis, you have everything in within everything without losing its own characteristics. Everything was everywhere. And these are representation of this kind of perichoresis. For example, in this case, you are seeing like again another map. This is a map, again a map of touching. This is done by Inuits in the snow. And since you have like no referential connection in within like a snow landscape, the thing that you do, you take your little stick that gives you information on how the terrain is done. So again, it's like a strange connection in between touch and walking. Well, this is like the same thing, but in the sea. And these patterns are also, they're connected to the perichoresis because this is sound, drone sound. These are maps. These little bottles, they are from the Indian pueblos. And the thing that they try to depict is how people sound while singing. So it's a map of feeling yourself in a certain frequency. These are maps to connect maps in within itself, and then suddenly maps appear in between. So well, basically this is like the system that I propose. This is the system that I think it's a way of organizing lots of information, and that makes it work for you. This idea of the perichoresis is basically the same thing that I'm talking from the beginning, and I would just like to end this thing with an image. Let me find this because it's, well, the Ouroboros, which is basically the same idea. There's a stone that the Greek also invented, well, the thrust effect, which basically is the same story of things within itself, Giotto doing the thrust effect, writers doing like stories within stories. This is Juan Esteban Facio translating the Nouvelle Impression d'Afrique. In structures are stories within stories. And this is the stone that would, it's for me, it's like the whole resume of the whole thing. This is the omphalos. And the omphalos is like Greeks thought that the world was containing one stone. And this stone was the stone that was given to Kronos instead of eating Zeus. Remember that he was eating all his children. And the stone that was given just to make Zeus not to be eaten was the omphalos. This omphalos fall into the earth. And this omphalos was the center of the fortune telling. This omphalos changed into the Roman structure in this form with a net that represents stars, and finally ended up in the holy burial in Jerusalem again as a strange cup which represents the center of the earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ERICK. ERICK has come from quite far. He's taken a long flight from Chile just this morning. So thank you for bringing the afternoon alive here for us as well. Are there any questions from you? Otherwise, we will start again with our discussion. But any questions from the audience?
How do you feel? Wait a second. How do you feel these patterns within different maps reflect fractals or fractal geometry?
Well, it's I think it's just like another depiction of certain patterns. The thing that I'm interested in is basically in patterns. The thing that is difficult to describe is like there are so many variations and there are like so many families, let's say, that it's difficult to split. That's more or less like the complication with this type of things. That there's a moment that you have to split. But if you see it in a little bit of distance, it's like a whole mass of things moving together. And I think that it's locally it's a huge mass with a lot of multiplicity. This is like mandalas and geometrization and it's one of these forms which tends into a more abstract thing. But I think that almost any kind of representation which is trying to make these links has these patterns. Sometimes they are not evident, but they're still over there, something running.
Along the way of the presentations, among the manifold images, there was this little one which was the Flammarion etching, and it depicts this medieval picture of the head emerging through the firmament. And so the body contained within an earthly space and the head extending out into another realm. Of course, one of the things of maps is that maps always map the self. When one depicts a territory, it's always mapping the point from which is mapped. And so I'm interested to throw that to you in terms of how you relate to those questions in this project.
Well, I just read a couple of weeks ago something that really, really appalled me. I read like a scientific research on how all these primates, I don't know, monkeys and orangutans and gorillas, that in labs they are taught on how to use language signs, no? And they can achieve like a language of a 2-year-old boy. But one thing that really, really shocked me is that from all these animals, these primates that have reached to communicate with people, there's none that have done one thing, which is make a question. None has made a single question, which it's really, really shocking, because that means that the possibility of seeing the universe outside the universe is to creating the first question, and which apparently it seems like a really, really difficult thing. So I try to use this let's say like throwing lots of marbles into the ground, just to see how they break in within each other, and how and I believe that there's a pattern. Of course, it's really difficult to see that, but I believe that there's a pattern. So I don't know. It's something that is still in my head.
I want to ask you if you can maybe tell me, you have this idea that the mapping of the mapping and of the machines that you're producing are machines to empty the uniqueness of sense. That are, I would say that these are machines to make everything like everything, and to empty the affective investment, the mental investment, the astral investment.
Well, I could say yes, but the reason is to make it, to multiply it again. Because I believe that all these, there are like also lots of connections in within. For example, around this emotional involvement with images, I've been working with a neurologist, Villayamurra, and he discovered that that images in the brain, they don't arrive directly eye-brain. They always go through the I don't know how you say this gland, the pituitary, pituitary, I don't know. Well, the thing is that they go always through that place. And people who have like lesions and have like I don't know, certain kind of disconnection, physical disconnection in between your eyes and this gland, which gives like the emotional charge to images, they got hooked into very strange loops. It's a syndrome that is called the Capgras syndrome, and this syndrome, people can't recognize someone they are supposed to recognize. So they start going like, when it happens to you, now that we're talking about also doppelgangers, people believe they are dead, because you cannot understand that you are seeing yourself in a mirror, and you are there, but you are not feeling that you are yourself. So I lean absolutely on this emotional thing, but I believe that it's just one part. I think there's a lot of things.
But I'm asking, is there any way in which it is comes into expression in the works themselves? Because in the works themselves, any connection can be done to any connection, and that's, for example, we know that about vision. It's not new. That it's not that we receive the signals and then we see. It is that we send to a certain we see midway. We meet. It's an encounter. You send certain frequencies so that you catch certain frequencies, and then you create a world which can allow you to differentiate choices according to what I call yesterday proto-ethical, which is in the aesthetical and so on. Now the problem with the machines that produces machines, like the maps that produce maps that finally will be this totalizing map, it's not that it's not possible or that it does not happen, but I wonder about the point of resistance, which I would say are either human or living. It's like your apps that want to put a question.
I understand absolutely, and I can say that my work is to try to prove that there's will in the world, but everything that I found is in the other direction.
So there is a big tragedy in that work that we have to signal.
So you just said that your everything in your work is to prove will. Yeah. Will meaning rationality.
Will is the chance of saying
Empiricism.
that the choice that you do is yourself, and that there's the machine of your brain is not tricking you all the time. I believe that the brain is a perfect machine to give you the absolute certainty of things.
And so what have you discovered that's in the other direction?
That everything is the other way. Like I believe, for example, things so simple like and so logical to prove that there's no color. Reality has no color. It's just perception. Things like so simple like this.
So all this kind of leaning towards spiritual dimensions, which I'd rather not call spiritual dimensions because everybody gets confused and upset when you say that. Let's just say.
No, I believe that there is this thing, and I believe it's really important.
Invisible world.
I absolutely believe in it. I believe it's absolutely important, but it's part of that machine.
So a more matrix-like kind of.
Not matrix. It's a more strange thing. No, I don't believe in the matrix. It's something that it's more like just this thing that I've been trying to really push into this thing, the separation that we have of space and time, which is now like A in physics. I believe that we lost, and modernity modernity taught us to forget what is a scale. And one of the tragedies that we face now in contemporary life is that we have no idea what's a unit. And it's really, really complicated to define this. And in order to start like creating these approaches of confrontation within the world, like saying, I am, or I open my eyes, this is the world, this is me, you have to have this, and we don't have units, we don't have scale, we lost our perception of scale. And if this is terrible in terms of perceptual and ontological structure, this is absolutely a tragedy in terms of social, no? In terms of politics, in terms of economics, and in terms of social interaction.
But can you just give an example, kind of for us Luddites, about
by example, well, I don't
our relation to our loss of our relation to unit and how that might be a problem. Could you give
in terms of everything, by example, well, a very, very kind of evident example is that nowadays the unit that we use in contemporary life is a unit that was created, that was colonized by a capitalist structure. It's the unit that we really use nowadays. The only unit that we use is the self, but it's an schizophrenic self. It's a self that is taking its own photograph with the phones, with the iPhones, every second. And that's why we can't understand, even though they tell us the tragedies. They tell us if we would have a little bit more of these relations of scales, I think that society would be uprising like since a long time ago, in different terms, in different situations, and in different because it's clear that that's the thing that's lost. They tell you, the debt is I don't know how many millions and millions, and they tell you the numbers. And this is the social, this is the evident. In terms of the self and ontological problems, it's the same thing, but it's more subtle, it's more complicated. I will be here like for quite a while.
We're running last part of today with Angela Melitopoulos and Olaf Olsen. And we also have a display in the glass pavilion, which we will talk about shortly after. Please be back with us in less than 10 minutes. Thank you.